Welcome everyone to this third public part of the workshop series Stories from the Future. We have a very special edition today, as you will see very soon, and it is connected to the fact that today is, or yesterday it was Halloween. It's the Halloween weekend, and we're actually not we're not streaming from 2020, but we're actually presenting you or greeting you and presenting from the year 2030 today. So we're 10 years in the future. We will show you what the future will or might look like in 10 years from now. And before we go deeper into that and into all these stories that will come from the future to you, just quickly 2 words of what the context of all this is. So this is a program that is part of the Collective Practices series that we've been running in 2020 as within Akut macht neu. My name is Daniela and I'm one of the curators from this program. And back then, there was a funding institution called Hauptstadt Kulturfonds that supported us to make this program possible. And luckily, it actually lasted for 10 years so that we can still be active today and send information back to the past. We will all be in Halloween costumes today, and I will put on mine, which I found actually in a vintage shop, because as in I think 2022 or 23, it was forbidden to go skiing anymore because there was no snow. The temperatures got too hot. There were no glaciers left on Earth, and so it wasn't possible to go skiing anymore. And funnily, I found this equipment in a vintage shop, and I thought my Halloween costume will be that of a snowboarder. So with that being said, I will give the word to Lisa and Dylan, who will be moderating today's session. And Lisa.
Thank you very much, Daniela. And yes, as Daniela said, we are talking live from November 1st, 2030. Daniela, it was nice to see your ski costume. I, as you may recognize, am a former US President, Teddy Roosevelt, connected to my favorite storytelling bear, Teddy Ruxpin. And I thought Teddy Ruxpin Roosevelt is a perfect costume for us because Stories from the Future was a project where about 20 participants worked together to imagine a better 2030, create artifacts and stories from that 2030, and bring them back to 2020. So it's now 10 years later, and we're reflecting on some of the artifacts, some of the stories we created. And to talk more about what we're doing today, let me shoot over to Dylan.
Yeah, hi. I'm currently plummeting through space in a life pod, which will become more apparent later. So today we're, again, as Lisa mentioned, doing a sort of retrospective of the artifacts we created back in 2020, some of the sort of works in progress. So we will have another exhibition in a couple of months that sort of have the final products. But again, on this momentous day, 10 years in the future, we thought it would be great to sort of reflect on these experiences so far. And so today we're going to have 6 different performances. And yeah, at first we have Franziska, who's presenting from a conference in 2050. So she's already in the future, I guess, and we're looking backwards. Sorry, I'm choking. And with that, I'll try to turn it over to Franziska.
Hello, my name is Christina. I'm a reporter from 2050. We are here currently in Zurich at an exhibition, and the topic is also the future. And I'm here with an expert of climate change, Dr. Elmer. And can you explain us what this exhibition is about?
Yes. Yes, I can do so. I first want to show you a little bit what 2050 looks like. So this is Zurich. As you may know, Zurich used to have a lot of lakes. Actually, I'm just kidding. This is a core from the Sahara. So this is something scientists did in 2020. And here we are in 2050. It's an exhibition from Climanesco, and I'm going to show you around a bit. And it's the 30th annual exhibition on climate change and climate futures. And they brought back the exhibition from 2020 back here to show people in 2050 what people in 2020 thought the future would look like. And one of my favorite ones is these little things here, which show how you could make Zurich, the city, green. So all the places which have a lot of traffic and not green spaces, there was an artist who actually looked and made them more green. And she used for buildings, she used maps of the mountains, which she tried to use glaciers because she thinks the mountains or the glaciers are changing and so are buildings. So the buildings may change by 2050, but the green space should be there. And the other thing I want to show you are these museum tickets, which were actually made as part of the stories from the future. So these are tickets that you can see. I'm not really good with my video skills, but these are museums you can go and visit in 2050. And they show how much we changed between 2020 to you when you are 2030, but then also between 2030 and 2050.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. So now, what can we as a society, what are the most important steps to achieve these goals that these visuals had, these artists had in 2020?
Yes, that's a really good question. So our listeners here are from 2030, so they don't know exactly what we have achieved now, but we still have a lot to do in 2050. But yeah, have a positive future in your mind and fight for it and work on it and get working even if you're just a person by yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Very inspiring.
Yeah. Are there any more questions from the audience?
Yeah, so is 2050 what you expected?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to know. I had different expectations for 2050, I think. And unfortunately, I cannot tell you much about what 2050 exactly looks like, because we are worried if we tell you what it looks like, whether or not we made it or whether we haven't made it, it will change the future. But we hope that you really keep fighting, because in 2050, we know that this is a super important fight and super important work, and keep the work going because we need it for sure. But
right.
Unfortunately, we cannot tell you if we will be successful.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for broadcasting to us from the future. it's nice to know that some form of it exists, at least, even though we can't know the details. And I hope that the rest of the exhibition goes well. And with that, we're going to switch over to Lisa.
Yes. Thank you very much for me as well, Franziska. That was very, very interesting. I especially want to go to those museum exhibitions. But since we've been talking a lot about the future in very vague terms, I wanted to make us think about the last 10 years. So I thought I would do it in a fun way with a trivia game. I hope you all like trivia. And to do this trivia game, I'm going to be asking you a few questions about the last 10 years. So what happened between 2020 and 2030? How well do you remember? Each question is multiple choice. And I'm looking at all of you right now, so I can kind of count how many people answer what. The answer choices are A, we're doing American Sign Language, A, B, or C. All right. So if you can remember to do A, B, or C, and if that's too complicated for you, you can write the letters on a piece of paper if you like, or I mean, maybe, I don't know, do it. Figure out a way to show me the right answer. Let's get to it. So the first question, I thought I'd start us off with an easy one. All right. And this one is, which of these governmental bodies was the first to adopt the donut economy? Was it A, the European Union? Was it B, the city of Amsterdam? Or was it C, the United Nations? As I said, a pretty easy one. What do we think? We've got a lot of B's up. Okay, everybody thinks it's Amsterdam. We've got 1A. We've got 1A of the EU. And everybody else says B that I can see. Katelyn, since you're the outlier, may I ask you to tell us why you think it was the European Union? Maybe you can convince other people to change their answer to yours. If you can unmute yourself.
I felt like that sounded unlikely, and maybe that it was a trick question, so I went with that.
Oh, trick question. You're thinking. You got your thinking cap on, or your thinking ears, at least. Well, you were thinking trick question. Unfortunately, you were wrong. The correct answer was B. The city of Amsterdam was actually the first governmental body to adopt the donut economy in April of 2020. The European Union didn't follow until February 2021, and the United Nations a full year later in 2022. So a little bit of a history lesson for all of you there. Second trivia question. We're getting a little trickier here, a little tougher. Food for All, as we all know, is an international consortium working to make agriculture carbon neutral. Now let's think back to when Food for All was started in 2023. How many countries were represented in the original consortium? Was it A, 13 countries? Was it B, 59 countries? Or was it C, 87 countries? So let's see what we got. Okay, we got A's, we got C's. Okay, it seems like we've got a good mix here. Nobody's for B. This is very interesting. I see, Mako, you're someone who's saying a C. May I ask you, why do you think C is the right answer here?
Oof, okay. I think because by 2023, the effects of climate change will be to the extent that they can't be ignored anymore. So more countries would be willing to sign on to such an initiative. I almost went with A because I was like, by that point, it's either very few countries or a lot of countries. So I went with C.
Okay, very good. Optimistic. I like it. Well, you're right. C is the right answer. So everybody who said C, you're right there. So now this one, we should all know the answer to because we were all part of the original cohort of Stories from the Future. But as I said, the difficulty is getting trickier. So we might want to think like Katelyn and think of maybe this is a trick question. So think carefully here for this third and final question. Which of these events did not emerge as a product of Stories from the Future? A, Stories from the Future did not publish an anthology in October of 2024. B, Stories from the Future storytellers were not invited to speak at parliaments in 3 countries. Or C, a mixed group of 3 storytellers from Stories from the Future is elected as leader of the European Confederation and is now welcoming back the former UK and some North African countries. Which of those 3 did not happen? We've got publication of an anthology, storytellers invited to speak at 3 different parliaments, or storytellers elected, a mixed group of storytellers co-elected to lead the European Confederation. All right, we've got a mix here. We've got, oh wow, everybody is all over the board. We got some C's, we got some B's, we got some A's. Okay, I gotta ask you, Mike, because for some reason, the way that you're making that C with your hand, it looks particularly demonstrative that you're especially sure that C is the right answer. Why is C the right answer?
I'm just not sure that I'm not sure storytellers are going to get elected as politicians. That's all.
We are a people that.
Okay, that makes sense. I like that. Well, it was B. B was the correct answer, and B was the correct answer because the storytellers were actually invited to speak at parliaments in 4 countries, not just 3. So that was a tricky one. I know it was a little sly on my part. So I hope you all had fun. I hope you enjoyed kind of that blast from the past, going back to the future, going back to the past, switching between time zones. And now, since we're getting close to halfway through, it is time for a word from our sponsor. So Robin, do you want to take us away with the... So I hope you all had fun. I hope you enjoyed kind of that.
All right.
Meet your new home. 144 people per community. Know your neighbors, but feel like you've got options. We reuse existing housing and infrastructure to establish green buildings that blend into the surrounding environment, where your water is recycled, going through a natural process of filtration and cleansing, where your energy is locally sourced from sustainable technology that doesn't backslide into fossil fuel use, where you'll use carbon-free transportation that's sometimes old-fashioned and sometimes high-tech, but it gets you where you need to go on time, where your food is local and you're part of the farming system. You'll know exactly where your tomatoes are grown and be able to thank the farmer and the creatures who support your healthy diet. We build communities that are vibrant and peaceful because each and every day you'll focus on consensus building through community-led projects with a focus on kindness and inclusivity. While we do allow minimal commuting, most residents choose to work from home and become highly involved in their Infinity Town initiatives. We focus on slow, peaceful living in small consensus-based communities. We hope that your new home will be with Infinity.
Thank you very much for sharing that. Robin, now is it true that you work for Infinity?
That's correct. And just so you guys know, I'm supporting the 47th of the Justice League films that we're now on. So that franchise has never died. And yeah, that's right. So I work for Infinity Homes. We are a sustainable, future, community-based, small community-based company. And we want to make sure everybody in the community is comfortable and absolutely sure that we are sustainabilizing your life. And so you can be absolutely positive that the thousands of dollars you spend every single year purchasing your right to live in these communities is well spent. So thank you for listening, and we hope that the short words from your sponsors make a difference in you choosing Infinity Homes.
Thank you. I'm sure everybody has this same question, so I'm just going to ask this last question, and that's, how much space is there in Infinity Homes? Can we all move into one of these?
Oh, absolutely. We're around the country. We've worked with lots of different sort of real estate firms to purchase up old brownfield properties that are no longer being used. And so that's part of our model, is trying to reuse properties and make them, LEED Plus certified in that process. So absolutely, they're across the all of the US territories and the United States as well.
Thank you very, very much.
Absolutely.
All right, so thank you for that. Next up, we're going to move on to a couple of stories from the 2030, written in 2020, if I have that correct. And I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Antonis, who will take it from here.
Hello, and welcome to Stories from the Future. This was initiated in 2020, as you correctly pointed out, and we managed to find a technology to reach diary entries from the future. Well, to reach diary writers from the future. And we're really excited because we managed to have 2 of them here, and they've agreed to read their stories out live, just for you. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna present 2 different stories out of those that we managed to get our hands into, and then we're gonna discuss about them. So without further ado, let's proceed with story number 1.
You can't make plans in 2030. It doesn't make sense. From week to week, you could be displaced by a flood or fire or a disaster of a more personal scale. So out of politeness, we scheduled things loosely to avoid talking about it too much. There's still emails to send, and we've adjusted our greetings to reflect the uncertainty of these times. It's not like the denialists hoped it would be. They thought it would get warmer and stay there like a thermostat, that the snow would melt and turn into a swim-up bar. But the weather isn't just hot, it's chaos. Strange, singular events divorced from any calendar or cultural significance. It feels like Earth has abandoned us. The small losses have been the hardest on me. I miss fireflies. I grieve autumns that smell like leaves and possibility. I cling to opportunities to wear my favorite coat. I know other people have it worse. There's tragedy in other states we once thought only possible in other nations, and we use the same tactics to justify it. As the danger gets closer, my own capacity for brutality and indifference is being tested. I try to romanticize the duality of it all by studying art from cruel time periods. People around me, good and smart people who care about all the right things, don't want to talk about what's happening. Instead, they say, it's just a little hot out. It's just a little smoky out. It's just a little rain. These rationalizations sound nice around the brunch table, like ice cubes clinking in sangria. But to me, they sound like biting down on a popsicle. It's not that I hate optimism or fun. I just can't stand the surreality of having to do so much to negotiate our existence on this planet. Outwardly, I smile, but once in my car, I shudder with impatience like a dog. In 2020, I thought it might be cleansing for me to go through a crisis, that it would be the reset I needed to finally stop taking things for granted and start writing my novel. I remember when word got out that the president was sick. There was a sense of shared elation that seemed to merit taking the day off. This snow day feeling was what I hoped it might be like when everyone finally understood our predicament. But as the years went on, it became evident there would never be a common understanding. Just a steady degradation of what I could expect from life and from others. Even now, they don't call it collapse.
Thank you very much for sharing your story. I'm curious, what drove you to write the story? Can you share the story behind the story?
became involved with Deep Adaptation Forum in 2020, and that was how I got connected to the Stories from the Future project. And I really got interested in all of this because I was very worried about the future and wanted to picture one. So it really was necessary for me to write a story about it in order to envision one. I wasn't sure if there would be a future at all.
Well, we live in 2030 now, so it's I guess we can't tell too many things for the public in order to not disrupt the time-space continuum. But maybe we can share some insights of what is it that made the future in your case possible?
I would say people. I took some creative license with the story by saying the people around me didn't get it, but I have been very lucky to have people who let me talk about it without judgment and also understand the situation we're in. And that's really the only renewable resource is friendship, because I thought when all this started happening in 2020, or really before that, but once I became aware of it, that I would need to like hoard things and start my own garden. I spent a lot of money on gardening and grew like one tiny potato. But I did realize that relationships are the renewable resource. And that's what has been able to allow me to still be podcasting from 2030.
Wow, that's an amazing quote. We need to keep that. Everybody, remember that. If you're listening from 2020, really remember that. Caring is what really matters. Make sure that you care for the people around you. We have another story. Let's go directly into hearing it, and then we'll have a short discussion on it as well.
Monday, October 14th, 2030. Portland, Maine, United States of America. Dear Diary, it's another beautiful fall day in Portland, Maine, where I'm writing from today, rather than back home in Boston. Today is Indigenous Peoples Day, or what we used to call Columbus Day back when I was a child. I still remember when I first learned about the horrible atrocities Christopher Columbus and other Europeans committed against the indigenous people they encountered when they arrived in what we now call the Americas. I'm glad to have learned the truth, and I'm glad we honor indigenous peoples now on this day. Today is also my 47th birthday. Since my friends, partner, and I have a long holiday weekend, we're celebrating by enjoying the fall colors, outdoor activities, and amazing cafes, restaurants, and bars Maine has to offer. In fact, since the holiday weekend often overlaps with my birthday, this trip has been a tradition every year since 2017. Well, I guess except for 2020 during the coronavirus pandemic. My favorite part of this trip has always been admiring the passing landscapes on our way to and around Maine. Our views of the coastlines and fall leaves have always been breathtaking, even if they've changed a bit over the years. When we first began making the trip in 2017, we didn't realize how the small windows in our old cars restricted our views. A few years later, when we switched to taking the train to reduce the environmental impact of our trip, we loved the way the train's large windows and the lack of distractions from driving made the views that much better. But taking the train did prevent us from visiting more rural parts of the state. So in the last few years, we've been taking the train to Portland and renting electric vehicles to venture away from the train route. With panoramic windows and self-driving capabilities, these new electric vehicles have made the trip more enjoyable, safer, and cheaper, and have enabled us to visit once again the farms and cideries we used to. Our views of Maine's fall landscapes and shorelines have changed in other ways as well. Wind turbines now extend above the trees and dot the coasts, and solar panels are increasingly common on roadways, train lines, and buildings. Some people, both locals and visitors, have objected to the installations, complaining about how they look. I don't mind them though. In fact, I kind of like the constant reminders of the trade-offs we're making in relationship with nature. All right, we're about to drop off the rental car and have dinner before we catch the train back to Boston tonight. While I'm sad another fall holiday weekend in Maine is coming to a close, I'm grateful for this annual leaf-peeping pilgrimage and the time well spent with friends in such a beautiful place.
Wow, thank you very much, Mike, for sharing this story. I'm a bit confused. I think we reached to different parallel universes. What is this? I'm not sure. This story is much more positive than the previous one. I'd like to get to the bottom of this. Mike, what was the inspiration behind this story?
Well, at the time when I was writing in 2020, I really wanted to imagine a future in 2030 that was one that was positive, because I think it's important to acknowledge that if we can't even imagine a positive future, we're going to have a very hard time building that future. And so I tried to think of something an experience that was really near and dear to my heart. And this is a very personal story because it is true that starting in 2017, I've been taking trips to Maine in the fall, and it is my birthday that weekend, and I go with friends and I enjoy the leaves. And at the time, I was really hoping that that would still be something that was possible in 2030, and that was a future that I wanted to see, even in a world where we're much less dependent on carbon for, transportation and for our lives. And well, I can't give away too much about how 2030 turns out. As you said, I don't want to disrupt the time-space continuum, but I really think that it's always important to be able to imagine a future that we want, that includes some of the beautiful things in life.
Thank you very much for this. And for the audience in 2020 listening now, what would be one thing that they should pay attention if they want such a positive future to happen?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to really, really support initiatives like the Green New Deal, right? We really need something that's going to help us make the transition to a carbon-free future, and it's going to take questions of social and environmental justice into consideration as well in how we build it. And so I would just really encourage folks to support their leaders who support it and vote out the ones who don't.
I almost forgot what happened in 2020. Anyway, pay attention, folks. These are the two stories that we were able to share with the public, the ones that would make this a seamless transition, so we will not be disrupting whatever you're experiencing. So thank you once again, Katelyn and Mike, for sharing your stories from 2030.
Thank you.
You're all welcome to join us in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, all three of you. That was lovely. Although I have to say, Mike, I wish there had been a bit of a wolf perspective considering your costume. Maybe next time.
I was just trying to think of something scary. And so, being a wolf and a lawyer, I think those are pretty scary.
A wolf lawyer. That's a horror film I haven't seen yet, but I would buy a ticket. Next, I'm very excited to present a crafty presentation about craftivism by Kristen. And Kristen, before you start, I would love for you to explain your costume, because I'm already imagining myself in that hat, but I need to hear the whole story.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Kristen. I hearken from the great state of Alaska, which, here in 2030, you might all be aware by now, is quite a bit warmer than it used to be, say, in the year 2020. So in celebration of the fact that Alaskans, even though we've had, in the past decade, we've had an amazing amount of climate change, Alaskans are very resilient folk. And so in honor of that, my costume today is a happy camper. Those mountains, though, as you can see in the skyline of my costume, used to have glaciers on them. But, if you go high enough in elevation, you're going to find some snow sometime. Might be on the top of Mount Denali, but, at least you'll finally see it. So, well, I am here today to talk to you about a movement that became very near and dear to my heart in the year 2020. As you all may know, 2020 is the past 4 years. The 4 years leading up to 2020 were also pretty rough, but 2020 especially was a very rough year. And so, being trapped in our houses in a global pandemic, it really forced me to try to seek out ways to keep my mind active, keep my spirit up, and make me feel like I was making a difference, even if it was something on a very, very small scale. And so that's why I'm here to talk to you today about the background is getting it. Craftivism. Okay, I'm gonna turn my background off. I apologize. Craftivism. Craftivism is a meshing of the words craft and activism. And essentially what it refers to, it's activism through what are known as the domestic arts: knitting, sewing, needlepoint, quilting, traditionally crafts that have been sort of relegated into this women's work type of mode, which actually isn't necessarily an appropriate moniker, but that's just how historically those types of folk arts have been discounted. And so craftivism really began in the year 2005 to 2010 was a really, really big time for this movement to bloom and grow. And the whole root of it is basically to inspire people to do kind of three main things. One core tenet of craftivism is people can raise money for specific cause, like Planned Parenthood, by actually making crafts and like selling them. That's one line of how this movement can be can have an impact. Another way it can be impactful is the actual act of people coming together to craft it together for some cause is a way to create a space for discussion and planning. So like an old-fashioned quilting bee, right? I mean, there's just ways of the actual physical act of making something together allows like a calm space to have like a collective presence. And then also, and Katelyn probably the most famously, craftivism, can really highlight a feminist issue through a traditionally seen craft and make that as a source and inspiration of public art. From my end, and here back in the year 2020, as part of this amazing group of people, a craftivist project that I am embarking on is making a quilt with squares from participants in this amazing collective practices group to make a quilt about what we think the year 2030 means to us, and kind of how all of our stories and how all of our renditions of what the future will look like will be captured in this quilt, which will eventually will be made physically by me, put all the squares together, and then displayed for the public to think about and look and see. So craftivism is really cool. There's a couple of resources I wanted to tell you guys about to look up in case you are interested. Betsy Greer at Craftvista, that is her Instagram handle. She is one of the original. She's actually the founder of the term and the movement itself. So she's a person to definitely put on your radar. Another example of a famous craftivist is a gal that goes by the handle Badass Cross Stitch. Very, very pro-feminist work on Instagram. She's gained a national recognition for her art. So that's another person to look at. And then if you're interested, I know it's kind of weird to say in 2030, I'm talking about the past, because by now this project will be done and awesome. But if you're interested and want to jump in your time machines and follow along with me and my project as this quilt, my handle is at Ptarmigan Collective. It's a group I'm starting here in the wild wilderness of Alaska to kind of track my journey through craftivism and things that are really near and dear to my heart, including climate change and all things of that nature. So hello from the future. Thanks for listening, and feel free to reach out if you guys have any questions concerning the amazing movement of craftivism.
Thank you for that. I guess, if I could follow up with one quick question is, in the 10 years that you've been involved, at least 10 years in this movement, what changes have you seen socially or even materially in like the way crafts are made, right? What sort of fabrics you use in your quilt these days if, cotton, for example, was not the most sustainable crop?
Yeah, exactly, right. And as Daniela pointed out in the beginning of this, of this presentation. One really chic, cool, hip movement that has come is people are taking old ski clothes and using the old metallic 90s zoot suit, European fly, high collar suits, cutting them up and making warm, cozy quilts out of them. And also, that fabric, you can put wires in it and it can become a heated blanket too. So, it's all about technology and repurpose, upcycle, and looking really cool while doing it.
Cool. Thank you so much for that. Look forward to more space techno quilts. Now we're going to turn to Glenn, who creates different sorts of soundscapes from the future. So he's taken different sound bits from the past, from the future, and he's melded it together into these different soundscapes. And so we're going to turn to him.
We are a people that call history, and most of my people.
So I was going to initially play some soundscapes here from 2030, but what I did instead is I was going to play the soundtrack to this documentary film that I made. Was actually sent back. This is a film called Stitching Rights by Mary Jane Sullivan that was released in 2020, and it's about the San Luis Valley, which is in the southwestern part of Colorado. There's a really unique high plains valley that stretches across many hundreds of miles and starts at the headwaters of the Rio Grande. And this is about indigenous land rights, and an issue that's been going on for a long, long time. After this film came out, the needle started to move, thankfully, in the right direction. They owned vast tracts of land in the mountain area around, and those were in the 60s and 70s sold to private landowners, and they lost a lot of this land. Since this period, if you've ever heard of the Great Sand Dunes National Park, it's at the very northern part of the San Luis Valley. It's a very unique area, and the Great Sand Dunes exist because these the wind comes from the south and really picks up speed and is funneled through the mountains and sort of brings all this sand and then piles it up, and it became a prime area for wind farming. And consequently, I'm not going to say if it's completely optimistic, but since this film came out, they've been able to win back big tracts of these lands and build these really great state-of-the-art wind farms and solar fields, and really win back the rights to the natural land that belongs to them for so many generations. So I'm going to play the trailer from this.
Pieces are history.
Of course, I saw them as expressive.
We are a people that come from an oral history, and most of my pieces are history.
Of course, I saw them as expressive pieces of women living in a certain geographical location.
She told me if you listen close enough, you could hear what the wind is trying to tell you. Yeah. What the wind is trying to tell you, what the river is trying to tell you, what the land is trying to tell you. You just have to be able to listen. Yeah.
We starve because we don't know. We don't know what's good for us or what's nourishing.
So an indigenous land ethic that says you have to take care of the land, you can't be greedy, or the land will not be able to take care of you. O como dicen en Nuevo México, de la tierra fui formado, a la tierra regresaré.
We may not contribute much in taxes, but the contributions that we make are along the area of culture, social, religious, and that is immeasurable, and you can't put a value on that.
In order for people to survive in this community, we needed that mountain.
There's a love for that mountain. It's not just land.
To us, it's La Sierra or La Sierra Madre, and it'll always be that way.
The way they destroyed this mountain was uncalled for.
It's like a thorn in the flesh, and it hurts our hearts.
And this is actually a beautiful mountain range. And I thought, well, it probably needs a cloud over it because they're fighting over it.
What they wanted was our land.
Our generation started to fight in 1974.
It's still mind-boggling to me after 30 years of working on this issue that any individual can own an entire mountain. It makes no sense to me.
The Treaty of Guadalupe is the agreement that Mexico and the United States made when the United States took over this area.
These grants were given to both communities and individuals in an effort to settle what was the northernmost part of Mexico.
When we came over here, they had barricaded the road and they had blocked the ditches. I told them, you cannot do this, you cannot block the ditches. They told me, why not? Who's going to stop it?
It should have never been in the hands of a private owner. It should have never been put on the tax rolls.
Really illustrates a very important value of an acequia culture and way of life, and that is the principle of mutual aid and cooperative labor. We all are very interested in making sure that our neighbors succeed.
The resources that are on that mountain is what keeps this community surviving culturally intact.
My grandmother always used the medicine around her, which definitely grew around the house. And also a lot was collected in the mountains.
That's something Monsanto doesn't know how to do, is how to discriminate between a noxious weed and an edible plant. We know the difference in our culture.
So it was very important. Without that mountain, we would have never survived.
It seems that the hill and the town were made for each other.
And we had a lot of trouble with it, always threatening to kill us and shooting at us and doing all kinds of damage.
In this place of the dead, Ama, here we walk on the pilgrimage path. Iwi Camina, for Mother Earth, the seeds of all creation.
Seed was very important to save. That's how we still connect with our ancestors through that old seed.
Today is a great day for San Luis. We have proved to the valley, to the state, to the rest of the country what a community can do when we all pull together. So today we can all raise our fists and say, "Si se puede." Let me hear you say it. "Si se puede." "Si se puede." Look around you and realize that when a community comes together, anything is possible.
All right. Thanks for sharing that. And just to follow up really quickly, I'm curious, what your thoughts are, or like a quick philosophical breakdown of what you think of soundscapes from the future. Why are you interested in that in particular?
Oh, soundscapes of the future embody and include all the conditions of that future, of the environment, of a relationship with the environment, and really, in some ways, some of it sounds familiar, I think, but there are also sounds that we've never heard before, and aspects of a changing environment that are so extreme that captured on audio and matched with scientific data and statistics and working with scientists, that we can better identify how to, how to improve our landscape.
Perfect. Thanks for that. And now we're going to turn towards an explanation of what I'm up to. And with that, I'm going to share my sound really quickly. Wow. Okay. So this is my first time communicating with people live, I guess. Maybe, I don't know, 4 months, 3 months. I don't know. It's really maybe been closer to 3 years. I just woke up from a stasis a few months ago, and I'm getting really close to Titan, Saturn's moon. There's several others of us out here. We just haven't had the chance to connect. People are waking up in their own time, I guess. In any case, I get distracted. It's so good to talk to people. I'm happy to be here presenting to you all, so thank you for your time. Thank you for this opportunity. So some context. It's 2030, But I left Earth in, I guess, 2025. I was part of an exchange program with the kind folks, things on Titan. In 2020, NASA discovered what they called a weird molecule, cyclopropylenidine, or C3H2, that pointed to early signs of life. Then we didn't know the half. So 2020 was when it all started. Or I guess I should say nothing really happened until it did. There was a global pandemic, climate change was getting stranger and stranger, more wildfires than ever that year. And the United States put a lot of faith, too much really, into the 2020 election. People were so hopeful that things would change. Biden won, of course, but then nothing changed. Nothing changed at all. At first, people were pretty discouraged. They sunk deeper into their Zoom tombs, glassy-eyed and hopeless. Then a few months after the election, a mutual aid group in Brooklyn, one that had been working since Hurricane Sandy, got a garbled email message. It didn't take long for them to figure out the message. It was a ping from Titan. Turns out they're looking for life on Earth as well. And they found a way to get in touch. They reached out to mutual aid networks across the planet because they assumed that these were the functioning global governments at the time. From there, things happened really fast. First, they materialized us a cure for COVID-19. They also sent along a cure for the common cold and HIV. They were surprised they hadn't figured those out yet. Their medicine resembled a much more advanced version of what we were calling CRISPR at the time, which is a gene editing software. Along with these cures, they introduced us to much more advanced modes of existence in general. They showed us ways to exist and think beyond our corporal bodies. To be post-human is how we put it. To live well is how they put it. The reason they reached out to mutual aid networks first is because that's how they do it. Their entire governing system is based on reciprocity. They take genes, but they freely give genes. The entire process is reversible as well, so nothing stays the same. You can take some genes, take whatever characteristic you want, and then you can give it back in time. So for this trip, for example, I took the genes of a snake plant, this one here, allowing me to breathe through them for oxygen, hence all the tubes. It also allows me to absorb nutrients from the distant sun. But in the process, the snake plant gets my carbon. So we kind of exist in this symbiotic relationship. We're cohabitating in this life pod. Anyways, here I'm getting distracted. So they showed us new ways of living. It's my understanding that folks volunteered pretty quickly for the gene editing programs. It allowed people to see the world from an entirely different perspective. When I was preparing to leave, climate change was already calibrating. People could already feel the planet differently for the first time. They could actually feel it in their bones. It was such a beautiful few months. And again, things happened really quickly. But here I am, getting distracted again. I told you I miss talking with people. I really miss learning with people. I was so thrilled when I woke up to a message that I was supposed to present at this year's Post-Human Political Ecology Conference. I remember when it was just the Political Ecology Conference. As you all know, I've been asked to speak about storytelling, which is the reason I'm here, even though I keep getting off topic. Again, the kind folks, still not really sure what to call them on Titan, based their experience off reciprocity. They gave us so much in such a short amount of time, but they did reach out for a reason. In the same way that we noticed C3H2 in their atmosphere, they were able to tell and read traces of what they were calling, or at least what we were translating as, symbiotic information blockchains. It took a lot of back and forth to finally come to terms with what they meant, storytelling. They could read it in our atmosphere. It left traces they were able to pick up, like we were able to pick up C3H2. They were in awe that every single thing on Earth admitted storytelling, this blockchain. To them, it was like currency or something like it, though it's much bigger than anything we'd recognize as money. They were drawn to our ability to make meaning, how our way of making meaning is entirely relational. In other words, it's based on exchange or reciprocity. We create each other. And to them, this reciprocal way of communicating, of existing, was a lost link, something they were missing. So they were more than happy to help us, but they wanted to learn more about storytelling. They sent us tools and resources to visit them, to share them. For example, the post-human editing software that I've been using to breathe, this life pod that I'm floating through space in. But they made a deal. though I hate to call it that, that could help them learn more about storytelling. So they created, again, a deal between Earth and Titan. Earth would send some of its best storytellers to visit Titan for a short while, on loan, kind of like a intergalactic library. So much rambling. Sorry, I keep getting distracted. I hadn't even gotten to the point of why you asked me to present. My brain's still a little buzzed from waking up, and I think in some ways I'm starting to think like a snake plant, whatever that means. In any case, you may be wondering how I wound up here. I'm certainly not the best known storyteller. Titan identified a group, one of many, doing important work in 2020. They found a group I was working with at the time, a project called Stories from the Future. They're intrigued by the process of the intentional way that stories were talked about and made. Again, it's hard to understand stories as currency, or even as having a tangible material sort of essence in the atmosphere. But if we think about it for a second, we were incredibly rich back then. The folks on Titan were drawn to ebbs and flows, the exchanges of the process. They were especially interested in our ability to think about the future while also existing in the present. They wanted to learn more about the way various elements of our society, colonialism, racial inequality, climate change, etc., were wound into the way we created meaning. To them, those negative experiences they kept separate in their societies. Thanks to Titan's technology, the artifacts we created from that group were broadcasted across the planet, and more people were excited than ever about the prospect of storytelling and sort of the power it has that we always took for granted. In short, the group Stories from the Future talked, and we decided that I'd be the one sitting in space for whatever reason. And here I am, only a month or so out from Titan. So all of that to say, I only have a few comments, some reflections that I have from my space pod here. First, I hope that things are going well there. I've received a few updates, including this invitation through my communications portal. It seems like things are better than ever. I would love to see it. Second, as of 2021, when I left the planet, we were finally figuring out the real weight of what it meant to create meaning relationally, to understand what a gift it was that none of our ideas, human or non-human, existed in isolation. That anything and everything we ever were, are, and will be is caught in a tangible, complex, material web of what we call storytelling. And that's something we always took for granted. But it's something that the folks on Titan were so interested in, and that's created this intergalactic cooperation, this library exchange of sorts. It turns out that we had this powerful tool, a way of not only imagining, but creating, building, seeing at our fingertips the whole time. It just took someone from the outside to point it out to us. I look forward to exchanges with them. I look forward to more exchanges with you all. And that being said, it looks like I'm running out of batteries. So thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate the opportunity to represent this experience from the future. And I look forward to more conversations.
Thank you so much, Dylan. That was wonderful. And I think I can speak for everyone from Stories from the Future that we're so honored that you're representing us in going to Titan and sharing what we've learned about storytelling over the last 10 years. So we have had a really lovely, lovely time together, or I have at least. I hope it was as fun for you as it was for me. We are nearing the end of the public portion of our time together today. Before we say goodbye to those out in 2020 who are following the live stream, I wanted to share with you kind of the last task that we're going to have before we who are going to come back together after a break, what we're going to do. And that's kind of piggybacking on what Kristen was sharing about craftivism. I thought we could take a bit of a craft break. So we're going to take 30 minutes, and however much of that 30 minutes you would like, you are invited to create a craft to think about what was the most surprising thing. This is surprising that happened in the decade from 2020 to 2030. Think about that change and bring it to life through a craft of your choice. So that can be pen and paper if you want. It can be quilting if you're super fast at quilting. It can be gluing things together. It can be paper mache. You can carve a jack-o'-lantern if you are so inclined. You can use any of the artifacts presented today, anything in progress. anything from your head. And just to give you a sense that this is not something that, you know, is going to end up in a museum somewhere, I have a sample. So one thing that I've been thinking about from 2020 to 2030 that really has inspired me, it's a really silly change, maybe you're thinking of, but a change that I've noticed is how much less clothing people need. I remember back in 2020, I would talk to people, they would have 100 pairs of socks. They would have 5 extra cartons of clothes they never even wore. And here in 2030, you know, I get along with 5 pairs of pants, 10 shirts for the whole year. I don't know about all of you, but I find it really inspiring, all of the clothes that don't exist in the world in 2030. So the craft that I made, woo, it's a ghost sock. This is a sock that doesn't exist in 2030. It was never made because people like me don't need a 50th pair of socks. So here, woo, super scary ghost sock. So that's just an idea of a craft that you can make to remember something that was really surprising that happened in the last 10 years. So for those of you on the live stream, it would be great if you could email those to us. If you actually make crafts, we would love to see them. So you can send them to us at the Collective Practices Akud Machnoi email address that is available on the live stream. You'll see it there. I'm sure Olga, our technical expert, can make that happen. And that's it from us for the live stream. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a lovely November 1st or whatever day it is. And everybody else, we will take a 30-minute break